Hi, my name is Carol, and I grew up in the beautiful mountainside of Jamaica, in the small part in the mountainside of the country called Mount Olive. I grew up with my grandmother because my parents and many others, they left Jamaica and all over the Caribbean islands in search of economic freedom. Some came by plane to England and some came by the boat, and how the Windrush came about. So basically, I'm a Windrush child. And so a lot of us were left behind with our grandparents. And so I was very fortunate. I had really lovely grandma. My granddad had died, and so therefore she had a few of us to look after at the top of the mountain and so forth. And at the age of 14, I came to England because she became too ill to look after me and the rest of the children. And one of her daughters had to take over the care of her, which was very, very sad for me having to leave her, because really that strong bond that I had with her, she was just such a warm and lovely, kind and caring grandmother. However, so I arrived in England on the 25th of May 1969. I came by the plane. The flight was really dramatic because the flight was changed at another country, and as a child of 14, quite bewildering, to be quite awful experience. And you just had to follow the crowd because the air hostess was supposed to look after you, but they didn't. They just leave you. And so anyway, I arrived safely and met my wonderful parents, my mum and my dad, and my brothers and my sisters and so forth. And it was quite a joyful moment, except the landscape of England was horrible. Although it was the summer, the houses, they were quite dark inside, they were cold, with outdoor toilets and lots of, quite strange and so forth. But the point is, I think it was a happy environment, and you were introduced to all the other people nearby from the Caribbean islands, from Jamaica and so forth, and you began to make friends and children as well. And then anyway, my mother, obviously, after the summer holiday, she needed to get me into a school. But I think because my aunt, who was a teacher in Jamaica, told her she had to get me into a grammar school when I arrive in England. And however, I don't think my mother knew enough about how the grammar school works. So she spoke to a friend of hers, and she had her daughter at a secondary school and at Lostock. And so my mother brought me along. And at the interview, I remember saying to the teacher that she wanted me to go to a grammar school. And there was a silence. And it was, well, why would you want to do that for your daughter? And so my mother was explaining to her the reason my aunt had said. My aunt said she was a teacher, and the lessons that they were having in Jamaica were the same standards or even higher than what they were having here in England. However, my mother was persuaded that I should be at this secondary school, etc., etc. And the school experience, some of it was good and some of it was very bad, because I had a horrible, horrible English teacher, to be quite honest with you, who constantly would make comments about my English and, lots of stuff, my grammar, and the reports to my parents were always very, very negative. But one of the things that was within me, I had a love for books and reading. And so I left school and then went on to a college in Didsbury. And at that college, I realized that I really had this passion for English literature and English language, and went on to do very well in those topics. And at the time, I was like, I didn't know what to do career-wise, to be quite honest with you, but I was leaning towards that was the kind of career I wanted to do, something to do with literature and writing. My parents didn't know what to do, and I didn't know what to do, and the careers officer didn't give you any guidance as to. So the best thing was, we were all bundled off into nursing, to be quite honest with you, because that's what they thought, was the best thing for people like us, we fill that gap in the market very, very nicely. And it was a career, to be quite honest, that I did enjoy. But at the back of my mind, I always wanted something else. I went on to do my teacher training myself once I'd done my nursing career and so forth. And then I had my family, and so I would always encourage my children to write stories. So when we took them away on holiday, they would come back from holiday, and I let them write their stories, write their names at the bottom of it, because there was this deep passion inside of me, for writing and telling stories and so forth. Fast forward, in 1995, I was studying for my BSc in public health, and I wrote my first book. Was really to do with services, to be quite honest with you, and a lot of failings that was happening in children's service. And it was really about the book, which is to be published, I hope one day, The Ideology of the Frog. But it was basically about how the services are to communicate better with each other, and so that, we could provide a better care. But again, that wasn't published because I didn't know what to do, where to go. And then later on, fast forward to about 2003, I was fostering, and the little girl I had loved strawberries for some unknown reason. We would go to the park and we'd be having, all these strawberry, and in my back garden, strawberry, what you call little picnics and so forth. And so I decided to write my first children's book, this Amelia and the Strawberry Tea Party. I was attending a writing group in Manchester, but again, I wasn't getting that support. And at the time, I'm still struggling, with this idea of how do I go about doing writing, even though I was now teaching in public health and so forth, and didn't really know what to do. Again, that book was never published until 2015. I trained as a coach, and there was a lady, and on her platform, her WhatsApp platform, she had a book about the 21-day journal. And I'd left work and was in a particularly strange space of my life, pondering what to do with my life and so forth, not wanting to go back into the public sector work and so forth. I'd done some traveling to the States and came back and was at a loose end. And so I spoke to her, and by coincidence, she said to me, well, do you write? I thought that was a strange question to ask her, and I said, yes, as a matter of fact, I do. She then said, and I wasn't really, the dots hadn't connected, because really what I wanted to talk to her was about how I was feeling a little bit, down and maybe a bit distressed and not being able to make sense of life at the present. And at that time. And so she said, I didn't ask why she asked that question. And so she went on to say, well, I actually know somebody who could help you. She said, she's very busy, but I'll ask her to make you a priority. And a few weeks later, I was contacted by a publisher, and I was invited to take part in her writing program, which I did. I traveled to Southeast London. It was quite a trek. And after a while of attending and started learning how to structure a story, and I think I'd also lost some confidence, because when you're having something that in the back of your mind, going back into my school day of, being told really that my English language was poor, and more or less that I was a poor communicator, I think that was playing heavily in my subconscious. However, having done this training with her, when I started to script, because it was about why do I want to write a story, there was a lot that was happening politically, and which I'd found distressing, particularly to do with our young men. I did not like what was happening to them politically in America or here and so forth. I wanted to really... There's a large gap in the market, which was done by research, to say that, we are getting a lot of poor representation, particularly of our young men. And I thought, well, if that's affecting me, how or these horrible images through social media must be affecting our children. And that gave me the inspiration to write stories. I wanted all children to be positively represented, to see themselves in picture books and to let them realize that they matter. And because when I had my children and when I was growing up, we weren't visible in picture book. All the books we had were European. And I thought we ought to change the narrative and let our children feel valuable, by just seeing themselves. And so that was the creation of my first children's book. And I actually managed to realize that, oh my goodness, this has been my dream and my passion after all these years from being a child growing up into the Caribbean. And that book is to inspire children, to help them to feel good about themselves. It also tells a story of some of our great ancestors that has gone on before and have done some great work for humanity. And it's also for them to realize that they are important and they too can make changes no matter what is happening in the world. They are great changers, they are great creators, and it's about letting them realize that they can be anything they want to be, from being a deep sea diver to an astronaut. And so the book Dolly May and the Magical Enchanted Garden was created.